My name is Minoj, Director of ProLighting Group. We are doing this free webinar series, which is related to the construction and facility management industry as a part of professional community service. Our all speakers are well qualified, well experienced in the industry. Today, we are bringing you another most important subject in HVAC industry, named HVAC optimization strategy. I will introduce today our speaker. He's engineer Kalum Siriwardana, who passed out from University of Peradeniya in 2005-6 period. I know engineer Kalum since 15 years and worked together some of projects in Dubai. He has 15 years, more than 15 years experience in the industry, especially projects in Dubai. At the moment, he serves as a consultant in Dubai for the construction industry. I will explain about his qualification background. He earned his Bachelor Science degree in University of Peradeniya. He earned his postgraduate diploma in strategic project management and engineering management in Overseas University, MBA in projects operation and management in Geneva Business School. He's having industrial exposure from consultation to the facility management sector, working as an engineer, senior engineer, and associative director, property manager, etc. He has involved several key projects in Dubai, including Dubai Atlantis, Tamir Towers, Mubadala Medical Center in Abu Dhabi, Siha Ambulatory Clinics, the Royal Atlantis as well. So that during his career in UAE, he has very good experience in HVAC, especially in HVAC optimization strategy. So that I have to highlight you, in 2008, he was the youngest senior HVAC engineer in during Atlantis construction phase. So that it's a very important for as a Sri Lankans. So I will not take much time. So I will hand over that webinar platform to engineer Kalum Siriwardana. Kalum, welcome for ProLighting webinar stage. You can start the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Minoj, and thank you for the intro given about me. And again, thank you for arranging this one and creating the platform to present the webinar. Good evening all, and I welcome you all for this webinar, which is about HVAC optimization strategies. So let me open the PPT. I trust all can see the screen. Yeah, so the webinar, we are going to talk about HVAC optimization strategies. So while we are moving on, so at the end of this session, you may be, our target is giving or enhance your knowledge on basically HVAC, heat ventilation and air conditioning. Then I believe this topic, district cooling, is might be a new subject for the Sri Lankan community, but I believe it is in port city development. So we'll talk about briefly about district cooling. Then we are going to talk more about HVAC optimization strategies. There I'm going to talk more about the practical cases instead of going through the standard and theory. So the session overview will be, so first of all, I'm going to just briefing about chill water system and air distribution system, which are the two major platform of HVAC system. Then a discussion or the then a brief description in detail about district cooling. Then our major topic, HVAC optimization strategies, which can be implemented in various project status from design stage to construction, before that pre-construction, construction, commissioning, and at the end, operation and maintenance. Then, the plan is to discuss more about the building management system platform in favor of the HVAC. Then finally, based on how the session is going on, we will, based on the time available, we will try to do a discussion, question and answer session. Okay, so moving forward, what is HVAC or why HVAC? So nowadays, to do our daily jobs or do our daily life, most of us are living in a controlled environment or inside a building or inside a particular premises. So to maintain the human comfort zone in terms of temperature and relative humidity, you should need HVAC. Means you need to you need to maintain the indoor air quality in the human comfort level by controlling the temperature and humidity. So so when we talk about the comfort zone, I believe you all aware of this diagram. This is a psychometric chart. So in the psychometric chart, if we highlight the comfort zone, again, that is depends on particular premises or particular country or the region. So this is a general idea. So temperature, dry bulb temperature, we say it should be between 22 to 27, and relative humidity 40% to 60%. Again, that is not a fixed value. As I said, it can be changed based on the particular region and particular occupant in the building or the premises. So temperature, we all know, better temperature is 22, or if we all are happy, if we can have a temperature on 24, 23. But what is RH? Why RH should be in 40 to 60%? So if you see this diagram, so it will show how is the behavior of different bacteria, viruses, dust generation, and ozone production in various humidity, relative humidity levels. So considering all of these, the best or the most comfort relative humidity level for humans is 40 to 60, 40% to 60%. So, however, we can increase this one or decrease this one normally in when we are defining operational parameters or air conditioning operational parameters for a building, we can say 30% to 70%. So we can play here and there because this is not a must to follow. So 30% to 70% RH level. Temperature again, for me, I can say 20 to 28. That will be my comfort zone. Again, that can be varied. You can define the comfort zone based on the particular premises requirement. So what is the standard we should refer for the comfort zone in air conditioning? That is ASHRAE 55. So ASHRAE 55 will define what will be the thermal environment condition for human occupancy. Okay, so this is a general or more generic schematic about the chill water distribution system in a typical building or a high-rise building. So we have chillers. These chillers can be either air-cooled chillers or water-cooled chillers. If it is water-cooled chillers, the condenser circuit will equip it with cooling towers. Then we have a dedicated primary pumps for the chillers. Then in the green color, you have the secondary pumping system. Then you have your cooling load, which is from either AHUs, fan coil unit, or a computer CCU we call computer room air conditioning unit. And most important thing when we are talking about HVAC optimization or the chill water optimization in a particular circuit, you can see this blue color line. We call it balance pipe, or someone may call it as the thermal bridge, or the decoupler line, thermal bridge, or the balance pipe. So while we are moving on the this presentation of this webinar, we will discuss in detail what is the importance of the decoupler line and how we can use the decoupler line or the accessories within the decoupler line to apply our optimization strategies to the chill water system. Okay. So when we considering about the chill water control, you can see here the chill water control valve in the near to each cooling load item. Maybe it is a AHU or a fan coil unit. So the chill water flow can be controlled through a general motorized valve, PRV, or the PICV, pressure independent control valve, or the picture is in the bottom. We call this one as the intelligent valve, where you have the flow controlling, BTU, or the cooling load measurement using the pressure difference and the using a flow sensor. So this is the latest valve available for the chill water control. Siemens, in Siemens manufacturer, they call it as the intelligent valve. Okay, so as I said in the beginning, in this webinar, I'm trying to more illustrate on the practical cases, or I'm going to present more about the different case studies I have been involved in. So again, for a general chill water system, I would like you to just go through this schematic, which talks about the arrangement of major equipments and the accessories in a chill water system. So you can see in this schematic, in the bottom, you have your chillers, which are air cooled. So in the two sides, you can see the cooling towers, it's mentioned as CT. Then after the chillers, in this circuit, individual chiller has a two primary pump due to standby. Then you have a common chill water header. Then from the chill water header, you have two secondary system. It mentioned as SP 9 to 11 and 12 to 14. These are the two secondary system which is feeding to chill water to two different buildings. So you have a common chiller plant, then two secondary distribution chill water system for two different buildings. Then after the secondary system, you have your tertiary system or the third chill water circuit through a heat exchangers. So from the secondary system, chill water is transferring to the heat exchanger. From the heat exchanger, the cooling transfer, the heat transfer will happen. Then after heat transfer, the tertiary system will work as a different chill water system. So the question will be, why this system, why a single chill water system divided like primary, secondary, and tertiary? We will discuss. Okay, so here this is your major chiller plant where the chill water is producing. Then you have the secondary system. Then you have the tertiary system. Okay, so just imagine this building is 100 meters tall. So in order to achieve at least 1 bar pressure in the top of the building, let's say in the roof level, we have a air handling unit. To correct operation of the air handling unit, let's imagine we need a minimum 1 bar pressure. So if you need 1 bar pressure in the 100 meters above AHU, then what should be your minimum pressure has to be in the ground level. So it should be 11 bar because every 10 meters is 1 bar. So to create 1 bar at 100 meters, in the bottom, you should have 11 bar. Then to circulate the chill water, your pump need to absorb the pressure losses in the valves, in the pipe work, different piping accessories. So let's imagine, let's assume, so these pressure losses, the addition of these pressure losses will be 6 bar. So then your minimum pressure the system should operate, when the system is operating, your minimum pressure at the ground level will be around 16 bar. Then how about the piping and the accessories? Then at least your piping and accessories should be rated for 25 bar. So imagine a building with 25 bar pipe and fittings and the equipment. What will happen to the equipment cost and piping cost and your risk? Because in case of any pipe leak, what will be the risk to the property and property damages? To avoid these kind of high pressure chill water systems, usually we are dividing the system. So in this case, you have your secondary pumps, which is feeding to your tertiary circuit. These tertiary circuit can be located in different level of the building. Might be, let's say, the building is 100 meters tall. Maybe the first set of tertiary system will be in 20 meters, second will be in 50 meters. So then what will happen to your operation pressure? So operation pressure or the pressure you need to maintain in the system dramatically drop down. So you can use lesser PN rated accessories, pipe and fittings, and equipments. So ultimately, it will provide you a very compare with PN25. It will provide you a low cost plus low risk on the building. Then we will move and talk about the general kind of introduction about the air distribution system. So in air distribution system, basically your air conditioning equipment can be either constant volume or variable volume. So in that case, if it is fresh air handling unit, return air handling unit, fan coil units, then if there is a car park in the building, it will be either natural ventilation, mechanical ventilation, or mix of both. We call it hybrid. Then washroom extract or the toilet extract system, kitchen and kitchen hood extract. Then more importantly, the stair pressurization, and depends on the premises or the project or the building. It may have specific ventilation requirements such as the indoor pools. If it is a hospital, yes, operation theaters and chemical storage. The more generic standard or the more popular standard will be followed for the air distribution systems during the design and construction stages are ASHRAE 62, which is about ventilation system design and indoor air quality. ASHRAE 51, ASHRAE 51 is for the ventilation fans. ISMACNA and DW 144 is for duct fabrication and duct specification. IS 655, again Indian strand, that is for the duct design. So again, when we are talking about the air distribution system, IAQ, indoor air quality. So that will play a major role, especially in the nowadays with the COVID, maintaining a particular requirement of the indoor air quality is came popular, and it came popular earlier with LEED or the green building requirements. Then again, for the when we talk about the air distribution, I would like to just have a go through in the air duct pressure and velocity classification. So in the air duct velocity classification, we are mainly talking about three: low velocity, high velocity, medium velocity, and high velocity. But in general building like commercial or the residential buildings, mostly we are playing with low to medium. High velocity duct system you can find only in the industrial, or in worst case, generator room air intakes for typical buildings. Again, the low pressure class, different pressure levels for each class. It's up to 1000 Pascal, then 1500 to 3000. So like that, it will the categorization is vary based on the, if you have categorized the duct system using the system pressure. Okay, so then these are the major topics which I can highlight here when we are talking about air distribution system. Minimum OA, outside air requirement. So when we are designing our air distribution or the conditioned air distribution system, minimum outdoor air requirement that may be per occupant or per square meter. So in ASHRAE, we have all these requirement as a range, because it is not in air conditioning especially, the code is, or the standards is not it is mandatory when you are designing the system, but it is not a must. As an example, let's say minimum air requirement, minimum outside air requirement, it always given, it always highlighted as a range. So again, based on, if it is a hospital, you should have more fresh air than return air. If it is a shopping mall, can be changed because the air conditioned system is not same as a hospital system. So that's why in HVAC, especially for the air distribution, what I would like to mention here is don't comply with the specific, don't comply with the standard. You can refer this standard, but you need to comply with the specification. So in that case, so that's why in the HVAC standard, particular requirement are always given in a ranges. As example, let's say second item, air changes per hour. So as example for an auditorium, as per ASHRAE, air changes per hour, the ACH is for an auditorium is 8 to 14. That means every hour, the particular air volume within the auditorium has to be changed minimum 8 times, maximum 14 times. So based on your property, based on your requirement, or based on your occupancy level in the auditorium, design occupancy level in the auditorium, you can design the system maybe to minimum, or you can considering higher occupancy level or a future expansion, you can always select 10, which is a value in the middle of the range given in the standard. So like that, in HVAC design, when we are designing a particular system, especially our distribution system, no need to comply with a particular value. You can always refer the standard and find out what is the most suitable value or suitable system for your design. Okay, so now I would like to briefly discuss about the district cooling. So district cooling is basically you have your chiller plant or the chiller system in a particular place. Then you have your different properties. These properties can be commercial properties, residential properties, or industry. Then there will be a underground chill water pipe, chill water supply and return pipe feed into each and every building. So in each building or each property, there will be a set of heat exchangers. It will take the chill water, cool your own chill water system, and distribute among the building for your requirement. So as I said, so it is district cooling. The chill water is distributing to a underground piping system. So it's a centralized distribution like electricity distribution. So like you are getting your electricity bill from the chill water or the district cooling service provider, end of the month, you will get a chill water bill. So what will happen to the, when we consider individual building or individual development, your project cost or the initial investment will be less because you don't have your own chillers. You need to have heat exchangers plus general chill water distribution system, like what we talked about previously, the secondary system. You have the heat exchanger, pumps, and your other equipment within the chill water system. So you don't have chillers. So your project cost or the initial investment will be less. So comparatively, if you are using district cooling, you can reduce your energy bill 20 to 35%. Your electrical bill will be reduced because you are not operating chillers, you are not producing your own chill water. So your operation and maintenance cost or the utility expenses will be less again. This is a typical schematic about district cooling. So in the district cooling major plant, you have again the chillers, then heat rejection system that might be either cooling towers or a seawater cooling. Then you have your major pumps. Then each and every building, there will be a heat exchanger. After the heat exchanger, you have your chill water distribution system for particular building. This will show again in the bottom, you can find district cooling supply return from the district cooling. Then you have your, in the building, you have your heat exchangers. After heat exchangers, you have your secondary distribution. So this is the, it is same as for the each building. So if you consider building N, the chill water, the district cooling incoming arrangement for building N, you have supply and return, heat exchangers, then the pumping. So from the heat exchanger, we can consider the bottom side as the district cooling, the upper part as the building or the property side distribution. So end of the month, based on your consumption, you will get a bill or your energy bill. So this is a typically how a district cooling energy meter parameters looks like. You have the energy consumption. It can be either megawatt or kilowatt. Then flow rate, what is the chill water flow you are using, supply and return temperature, and the delta T, temperature difference between supply and return. Okay, so advantages. When you talk about district cooling, the major advantages will be the carbon footprint. Then we consider as an overall, not as an individual building, overall community or overall development with a district cooling. So your CO2 emission will be less. Then energy consumption again, electrical plus water will be less. Initial investment for individual property will be less. You will get saving on the space because you don't need to consider plant room spaces for the chillers. Reduce operation and maintenance cost. Reduce usage of chemicals because if you have your own chillers, you need to use the chill water treatment chemicals. So that quantity will be less compared with the system with chillers. Energy efficiency improvements, noise pollution, and the risk because now the risk is transferred to an expert who's providing who's a specialist who's providing a chill water to your building, like the electricity provider. Disadvantage. Okay, the major disadvantage is district cooling can be applied only for a greenfield development. Greenfield development means like Port City in Sri Lanka. So from the beginning of infrastructure development, you need to consider if it is district cooling, you need to design the particular system from the beginning because let's consider one particular inbuilt town. It's very, very challenging and difficult to have a district cooling because you need to run the pipes and make the connections. So with the built city or built town, which is practically not possible, then higher capital cost compare here. Higher capital cost means when we compare the district cooling as a complete development because you need to have a underground network, piping network, and district cooling plant. So when we consider complete development, your capital cost will be high. Then possible temperature and pressure fluctuation that depends on the load variation within the cooling load variation within the district cooling network. Okay, now this is our major topic. The major topic we are going to discuss in this webinar. what is HVAC optimization. So before moving, we should know what is meant by the HVAC optimization. The first one is the simple explanation I can give. Design, construct, and operate of HVAC system in line with building cooling demand. Okay, let's say you are producing 100 kilowatt, but your requirement is 25 kilowatt. That means you are producing extra power. That is not the optimization. Optimization means you need 75, so you should generate or produce at least closer to that, slightly above, maybe 80 kilowatt. So in this session, we will see how we can optimize the HVAC system from design to operation and maintenance. So as I said, I'm going to talk about different stages of a project. From design phase, I'm going to talk about what are the strategies or what are the methods we can apply in these different design phases. Then pre-construction, during the pre-construction or the value engineering phase, how we can apply these optimization strategies. Then the construction phase, and at last operation and maintenance, how we can apply these different optimization strategies related to a HVAC system. Okay. So in the design stage of any project where you are going to design a HVAC system, you should, as a designer or as a consultant or as the HVAC design engineer, you should develop a robust HVAC model. What's mean by this? What's mean by a robust HVAC model? Let's see. So these are the various input or various considerations, various data and the facts you need to include in this model. Building data. So here you can consider what are the available data as per the, let's say the building is a commercial building. So available data will be how many office floors, what is the occupancy, is there any particular cooling requirement like a data center? How about the parking arrangement? Is there any restaurant? Is there any kitchen? Is there individual washrooms in each level, each floor? How many washrooms? These kind of things. Then for the data which are not available, you need to assume. But your assumption, you should clearly you should have a clear idea about your assumptions. So total building load, occupancy profile, and operating profile. Is the building operating 24/7, or is there a particular operation hours, 8 to 4, 8 morning to 4 p.m. Then building is going to the non-occupancy mode. Like that. If it is a residential building, your operating profile will be 24/7 because people are living in the building 24 hours. Then the climate condition. If this building is going to build in Sri Lanka, or the building is going to build in Abu Dhabi or Dubai, or it's going to build in, let's say, Switzerland or England. Then based on that, based on your location of the building, climate condition, temperature profile, RH profile, and solar radiation of that particular region. Those data are available with ASHRAE. You can find out, or you can get this data from the local weather department. Then diversity factors and part load condition. Again, this is clubbing with operating profile of the building. Is building going to be occupied fully or as per the operation, or what will be the operation profile of the building? Based on that, you can determine what should be the diversity factors and the possible part load conditions. Then is the building is expected or are targeting for any particular certification, like LEED Silver, LEED Gold, or LEED Platinum. In Sri Lanka, is the building while constructing, are they targeting for any green building, GBCSL certification, or any other international and local certifications? So this has to be considered in your HVAC model, HVAC design model. Then the design parameters, what will be the system configuration? Okay, if it is the, if you're cooling producing through water cooled chillers, air cooled chillers, or do we have district cooling? Then next one is the zone configuration. Zone configuration means how many AHUs will be in the design, where are they located, is the AHU with, we will discuss in further slides, is the AHU with return air type. If it is return air type, it is with VAVs, or the fresh air AHU with fan coil units. Those things you need to consider clearly in the HVAC model. Then the operational sequence, how the plant will operate during the actual building operation, what will be your control philosophy or the sequence of operation. In this level, at the HVAC model, when you are developing the HVAC model in the design stage, the plant operation sequence can be with the indicative idea only, that can be developed further when you are developing your design. Okay, so if we are designing or if we are considering a HVAC system for a small house, following the rules of thumb is fine. I mean, that obviously we are doing when we are designing or when we are sizing a small AC unit for a particular house or particular small development. But if it is a building, if it is a if the property is a complex and having different zones, as we discussed previous slide, please don't use the rules of thumb. We have to use accurate cooling load estimation. So means you need to use the standard data either from ASHRAE or any other available standard. Then when you are applying the safety factors, what most of the design, what we used to do is we will calculate the total cooling load and add 10% as a safety factor. So that will, okay, you are adding 10%, then maybe it's go to the different level. He may be at another percentage as another safety factor. So end of the day, your plant or your cooling system will be oversized. Because during the design, we are worried about future expansion or various future expectation. So based on that, we are keep adding safety factors, and that will oversize the HVAC plant. So when you are considering a safety factor, you have to be very careful in the design stage. Okay, the most popular design method is the dynamic calculation method. So there are various methods available using the HAP software, which is the most famous one for the HVAC load calculation, the Carrier HAP software. So in that one, or in the dynamic calculation method, you can select your HVAC design based on the zoning, different zoning, then daily diversity based on the orientation of the building, whether the when the building is facing to the east and west, so with the sun rising and in the evening, so you know the solar radiation or the solar the heat load due to the solar will affect on the building load. So all these factors can be considered correctly when you are following a dynamic calculation method. So as a designer, when you are designing a HVAC system for a particular building, it is recommended always to follow a dynamic calculation method. So as I said, the systematic approach strategy. So, okay. So as I said earlier, let's say you consider particular zone in the building and select a AHU based on the cooling load of that zone. And then you move to the next zone. So that is the typical way when we are designing a complex building, HVAC system for a complex building or bigger property. So like that, when you are differentiate the zone, you can identify mission critical or high load area. Example will be a data center or a call center in a commercial building, or a commercial kitchen in a building. If it is a hospitality building, maybe let's say it is a 5-star hotel, and the most expensive room or the most expensive guest room. So those will be your mission critical or high load area. So you need, in the design stage, you need to identify those, and it's better to separate these critical areas and do your calculation, do your heat load calculation separately for these particular mission critical or high load areas. Then you need to ensure the particular system designed for either mission critical or general area is compatible or is behaving correctly or behaving in a good ratio for the when it has the part load performance. Example, let's say you are designing a AHU for commercial building. You are going to size a air handling unit for 3 floors. Just imagine these 3 floors are office floors. So as per the design, as a data in the design stage, you are getting the detail. Each floor has 50 people as the highest occupancy level. So you are designing the AHU for 150 people and particular number of printing machines, particular number of small T point with heaters and those things. So then that will be your higher demand, 150 people plus these equipments. Then what will happen to the system, let's say during the vacation period, or yes, let's say in December during the Christmas vacation, your occupancy level or your uh, the staff in that particular 3 levels is reduced to 50%. Then how the air conditioning system will operate, that we call part load condition. So you need to consider these things. What should be the system compatibility at lower load? How we can do that one? So don't worry about that, because we are going to discuss each of these things practically in the next slides. I'm here going to, I'm just mentioning the things you need to be considered in the design stage. Then again, system arrangement, then the system configuration, your control strategies. What are the things you need to consider about the HVAC control, controlling system, building management system platform, metering facility where you need to put the meters, where you need to put your temperature sensors, relative humidity sensors, or the BTU meters, and different valves. What should be the exact location and how many valves you need to put, and what should be the control strategy for these accessories. Then load flexibility of the design model. So how you can define or how you can make the design with the flexible loads. So nowadays, when you done your design using a dynamic calculation method, you can simulate your model. So during the simulation, you can identify what will be the how the based on your air distribution, you can identify where you have the lesser or the lack of air circulation, and based on that you can address those areas and you can fine tune your design. So in the simulation, you can test your proposed design in various operational scenarios. That means, as I said earlier, 50% of occupancy, 70% of occupancy, or different outside weather condition. Let's say outside weather condition is high humid day with a temperature of 35 degree, RH of above 80%. So based on different scenarios, using these simulation modeling, you can test your final design and fine tune it to match with the practical requirement. Okay, so then we will move to the construction stage, how we can apply the HVAC optimization strategies in the construction phase of a project. So pre-construction, so I think all of us familiar about the value engineering process. So during the value engineering, so value engineering is, okay, everybody is, during the value engineering, most of us is try to reduce the cost. But value engineering, that is the period of a project which give you a chance to identify maybe the technology that is missed during the design stage. Let's say design is done 3 years ago. Now it's come to the construction phase. So within that 3 years, technology or the building technology is changed, because 3 years means nowadays it's a long period where technology can change very quickly. So these things can be considered during the value engineering. If the design, let's say in the design, there was a air handling unit is selected and is specified. That air handling unit specification, type of the motor or the construction method can be rethink during the value engineering. And if find suitable, we can change the specification of the construction of unit or type of the motor or the type of the blower, type of the cooling coil. Then that can be changed during the value engineering. So value engineering is not always reducing the cost. After applying a particular value engineering concept, maybe the cost of particular system within the project can go high. So during the pre-construction or the value engineering process, LCCA, life cycle cost analysis, that is the one of the best tool you should consider that stage. So using that, you can determine how to select particular equipment related to HVAC, air handling, chillers, based on the life cycle cost analysis. Then in the construction, when we talk about the HVAC, quality of the workmanship, that will play a very big role, because let's say during the chill water piping installation, what will happen? The installer wrongly connects supply and return, or instead of a strainer, if he put a DRV valve. So that's why I said quality of the workmanship during the construction is very important. Material selection, verification. Verification means verification of AH, if it is AHU, verification of ESP, external static pressure. So doing a calculation based on the construction drawing or the construction, the final ducting arrangement. The contractor can do or the installer can do the verification of ESP calculation. So let's say in the design, the ESP of particular HU is shown as a 600 Pascal, but when we do the verification, it may go high, it may go down. If it go down, you can reduce the motor capacity or the fan capacity of the AHU. Just imagine, without verifying or without verification, you follow the design and install a AHU. Let's say the design ESP is 600 Pascal, but actual requirement is 500 Pascal. as per the construction or as per the construction change drawings. So that again, you are selecting a higher capacity motor instead of a lower requirement. That's one example. Then again, the control valve selection, we are going to discuss about that one in future slides. PMS graphic development, control philosophy, sequence of operation. Then in the testing and commissioning, what will be your tap method, hydronic balancing method, and how you will verify and fine tuning the values and the sequences of operation. So here I would like to show you this graph. This is the different cost related to a asset. Let's say the asset is a air handling unit relevant to HVAC. So you have the capital recovery cost in blue, then operation and maintenance cost that will always go high with the time. Then fixed cost is there, that is might be the utility cost. Then when we add all together, we can make this final curve in black color. We call this one the total cost. There is a name for that one, bathtub curve, which is familiar in the maintenance industry. So when we consider the point where the operation and maintenance cost started to go high, that means from this point, you will get more breakdown or more failure. So beyond that point is considers the someday beyond this point, the equipment is going to retire. So up to this point is considered as the economic life of a asset or a equipment. So when we are doing the life cycle cost analysis, at least for the major equipment during the pre-construction or value engineering, you need to consider this particular parameters. So this graph present why LCC or life cycle cost analysis is important during the pre-construction stage. Okay, so as I said, the valve selection for HVAC chill water system. So control valve authority is one of the major parameter or major item you should consider when you are doing the control valve selection. Control valve authority means how well the connection between control valve or the motorized valve resistance with the remaining part of the chill water circuit. So if the pressure drop through the control valve is high, that means it has a better control. Higher the resistance, the better the flow control we can get. So in calculation, when we are selecting a control valve, we are using these values. I will tell you what are those values. So in this axis, we have pressure drop, and the other side, we have the flow, kilowatt flow. So this blue color dot, which present the control valve is at full open position. Let's say it is a two-way motorized valve, which is in the full control position. Then there will be a pressure drop through the valve that is called the valve pressure drop. Then when the control valve is moving to the zero flow, that means control valve is fully closed. Then that will equal to the control valve pressure drop plus system pressure. Or what are the remaining pressure drop in the circuit? Let's say this control valve is controlling the flow going through a fan coil unit. So when the control valve is in fully open, the pressure drop through the valve is only the pressure drop through the valve. But when valve is going to the zero position, the valve itself absorbs the total pressure drop in the circuit, including different valves in the valve package, pipe resistance, and etc. So control valve authority can be calculated by using these two values, valve pressure drop and remaining circuit pressure drop. So what will happen? Your control valve is oversized. Based on this equation, if the control valve is oversized, that means the pressure drop through the valve is very less. So your pump head will be less. No need to provide high head through the pipeline to pass the particular flow rate through the valve. But when we consider in the flow control, that will affect the correct flow control, because the valve will always operate near to the close position, because when it is closing only create high pressure drop and provide better flow control. So valve is always trying to operate near to the closed position. So that means we are unable to getting the correct control with the flow requirement. If other way, if the valve is undersized, it will create a higher pressure drop, and any minor movement of the valve actuator, it will provide a very better or very good flow control. But again, it will increase your pumping cost because you need a pump with a higher head. So in general, based on the above equation, when you are selecting your control valve, a control valve with a valve authority above 50% considers as a better selection in a chill water system. Okay, so then when we move to the operation and maintenance, different strategies to be applied in the operation and maintenance. These are the major factors are affecting the operation and maintenance of a chill water system. So first one is chill water low delta T syndrome. Chill water low delta T syndrome. So we will discuss one by one. Then demand flow operation, time scheduling, IAQ, water treatment, energy monitoring, life cycle analysis. So all these things or all these strategies are to be applied during the operation and maintenance, or we call this one as the maintenance strategy of a particular, the maintenance strategy you are going to apply for a particular building or particular premises should include this consideration of these HVAC optimization methods in the maintenance strategy. Okay, what is low delta T syndrome? Okay, let's say your chill water producing machine, chiller. The supply temperature, the chiller can supply is 6 degree, and as per design or as per the chiller selection, it should get a return temperature of 12 from the load. So delta T is 6 degree. So that means your delta T in the chill water system is 6. So if you are not maintaining a 6 delta T, your energy consumption will go high, efficiency will go down, and that will affect the occupant's comfort end of the day. Why maintaining delta T is important? So I would like to go through this case study value. This is one of the property I worked. This is from the same BTU meter values in 2 different years. So the first year, 2016, you will see the total kilowatt hour based on the daily pump flow rate, supply and return temperature, and the delta T. And this is the same BTU in 2017 with different delta T. Here the basic equation in the BTU is QE equal to MC delta T, the famous equation in the heat transfer. So if you consider these values, so in the first example in the 2016, check only the pump flow rate or the flow rate in liters per second with delta T, and again in 2017 table, consider the pump flow rate and the delta T. So in 2017, only difference done is try to maintain, this is the delta 6 system, so try to increase the delta T. That means try to maintain or try to achieve the required delta T in the system, and see what happened to the flow rate. almost 50% reduction in the flow rate. That is electricity bill, because that is the pumping cost. As example, in 2016, if the pump motor is 25 kilowatt, let's say that pump in 2016 is run at 40 hertz or 80%. In 2017, it is 50% less speed, 50% less flow. Sorry, because I couldn't put the monetary values or savings here because of the compliance issues or compliance requirement I am having with the current engagement. So that's why I put only the technical value. So as I said, you are reducing, based on these two examples, you can identify pumping cost is, or pumping requirement is almost 50% less by increasing the delta T. That also not near to delta 6. As you can see, it's near to the in between 3.5 to 4.5. So you can see the difference. So if you maintain the delta T correctly, you can save a lot on pumping cost. It is okay. Not only pumping cost, not only the electrical, you are reducing, because if you are running, consider two scenarios where the pump is running 40 hertz continuously, high speed continuously, and the same pump is at a lower speed. So again, the maintenance cost, wear and tear, and again, the system efficiency. Okay, so now we know what was the issue with the delta T. So just go through this schematic. You have the chiller. This is the same schematic I presented in the beginning. You have the condenser pump and the cooling towers, and you have your secondary distribution and tertiary distribution. Okay. So as I said, the chiller side is your production unit. Secondary and tertiary is the distribution. And here we have the, in green color, accessory is the decoupler, where it will bypass the supply and return headers. So in the distribution side, that will provide you your demand, or the cooling demand, or the building cooling demand. As I said earlier, extra production, if you produce extra chill water than demand, that will affect the chiller delta T. Because for better understanding, let's say from the chillers, chiller 1 to 4, let's say 2 chillers are on operation, each chiller is producing 50 liters per second. So you are getting 100 liters per second chill water. In the secondary system, secondary distribution 1 and secondary distribution 2, your requirement is 30 liter and 40 liter. So total is 70, but you are producing 100. So the balance 30 liters per second will come back to the chillers through the decoupler. So what will happen to the chiller return temperature? Chiller return temperature is drastically going down, because the bypass flow will come back to the chiller. So that will reduce the chiller delta T. So better understanding, let's say chiller is supplying 6 degree. For the correct operation or correct efficiency of the chiller, you need 12 degree return. But as you are producing extra chill water than the demand, as the produced chill water is coming back through the decoupler, your return temperature may drop down to 9 or 10. So chiller will not perform correctly, or chiller will not load correctly because of lower delta T. So another strategy is, we call it demand flow strategy. Operate your chiller plant based on the demand flow. Complying with this earlier example, your secondary is required only 70 liters per second. So you should produce in the chiller plant closer to 70, maybe 75, maybe 80. Means you should have a proper communication between chiller plant and the secondary system. That is again the BMS. Okay, so going back to the previous slides, So we have the secondary distribution, then after heat exchanger, we have the tertiary system. So here I would like to show how will be the tertiary system arrangement. So from the secondary system supply and return, you have the heat exchangers. Then again, separated closed loop chill water system, which is tertiary system. You have dedicated pumps, then expansion or the pressurization system, chemical dosing, because it is a separate system. So this will be the tertiary system. Okay, then chill water pump control are based on differential pressure sensors in the chill water circuit. So in general, or in what we call rule of thumb or general practice, what we do is when we are locating this differential pressure sensor, which controlling the chill water pump speed through the VFD, what we are generally doing is we are find out what will be the longest terminal point or longest fan coil unit in the chill water system and measure the length of that pipe and put the DP sensor 2/3 of that pipe network. Then we are allowing that sensor to control the pump based on the pressure difference in the supply and return. So instead of that, kind of one step developed that way is putting two sensors, master and slave arrangement. So one DP sensor will be near to pump, maybe in the pump room, and the other DP switch or differential pressure switch is in the longest location or the longest item in the chill water system. So that will provide better pump control compared with the single differential pressure switch. Okay, system delta T. What will happen to control the pump instead of only the differential pressure? What will happen? We will combine or we will try to make a connection between DP and the delta T. Let's say system delta T is 6 or delta T is 6 system, and we are maintaining or we are changing the pump speed. We are controlling the pump considering only the differential pressure switches feedback. We are not considering delta T. So when there is a higher requirement of chill water in the further circuits, pump will increase the speed. When there is no load or lesser load in the circuit, pump will decrease the speed. So that is the basic operation if the pump is controlling only with DP switch. But now we are going to introduce another parameter. Okay. There is a requirement in the the furthest point. But before the pump start to increase its speed, it will check the delta T. Is the delta T at a correct level? If delta T is near to 6, yes, pump will increase the speed because the system efficiency, mechanical efficiency of the system is acceptable. So this is one of the strategy which has to be used carefully, because what will happen is if you put the delta T as a mandatory requirement or mandatory checkpoint before the pump speed change, it may affect because you will get the high temperature complaint maybe from the furthest chill water points, maybe at CO, AHU, you'll get the complaint from the equipment. So it's kind of a trial and error. Then you need to find out what will be the current blend between the delta T, how maybe you can put a time delay there. Then with your trial and error, identifying the better time delay, you can implement that one in the pump control program in the BMS. Okay, so for the delta T syndrome, the treatment can be applied with your in-house maintenance team. You can do the continuous check operate and confirm that all of your valves, DRV or the pressure independent balancing valves, are at the correct position or correct commission set points. As we discussed earlier, you can recalculate and verify the location of differential pressure switch is in the correct place. If not, relocate and test again. Then increase the knowledge of your technical team through on-the-job training. Then again, recheck and verify the actual operation comparative to your design you have. Advanced or specialist treatment. You may proceed if you have the continuous delta T issues. Go ahead and rebalance the system, hydronic balance. Or you can check, you can bring a specialist, consultant, or yourself. You can do the, you can check and verify whether the selected valves are selected as per correct valve authority. If not, at least if you found that valve authority is below 50%, at least try to retrofit major valves. Then with lower delta T syndrome, when you are trying to maintain the system in the correct delta T, you will identify that particular locations you are not getting enough chill water. It might be a riser, or it might be a further point, or in the middle point. So once you identify that point, what normally or the generally what people will do is, if the one particular room, let's say your building or your premises has 100 rooms, all rooms are fine, but one room is not cooling. What will you do? Most inefficient thing that we will do is we are increasing the pump. 99% okay, 1% has an issue. To address that, we are increasing the main pump, which is wrong, which is not the efficient solution or the effective solution. 99% fine or 98% are operating fine. Go to that location and identify what is the issue. Maybe pipe cross connection, or maybe something blocked in the line. So if it is a riser which is feeding to let's say number of FCUs, you can introduce a small pumping station there. That's one of the solution. Or else, as advanced treatment, you can upgrade the chill water system using PICV or PIBCV, or you can introduce newest technology as a retrofit project using your CapEx. Okay, then the condition air optimization. So far we talk about the chill water side. Now I would like to talk about the air side. So in a building which has the conditioned air or the air conditioning system, it is recommended to maintain the building in positive pressure. Reason is, if the building operates in negative pressure, the outside air will enter the building through infiltration. That will increase the cooling load, condensation issues, and various things. But this is a challenge because to maintain a building in the positive pressure, you should have a proper ventilation system. Plus, you should have a high quality drainage system, because if your drainage system is giving you some smells, you cannot maintain the building in positive pressure. You need to exhaust most of the air to maintain comfort level. Then you can introduce time scheduling. As we discussed earlier, operation based on the operation and non-operation hours. You can introduce time scheduling for the air distribution equipment, air handling unit, fan coil unit. Again, you can provide different supply air temperature set points based on the occupancy level or based on outside air condition. You can introduce newest technology. You should have a proper maintenance regime, PPM, periodic preventive maintenance regime. Then you can maximum usage your return air. We will see how we can use the return air in different types. Okay, so one equipment is AHU with heat recovery. Air handling unit with heat recovery, we have two major types. So first type is with the heat exchanger. So with the heat exchanger, this type of unit can be used for the building, and we can use the exhaust air from the washroom, and we can use that exhaust air from washroom normally, which is coming below 26 or 27 degree, to pre-cool the fresh air or the outside air coming to the air handling unit, because there is no mixing which is going through a heat exchanger. So no mixing of the air, only the heat is or the cool is transferring. So let's say the outside air which is coming from the external environment, as for this graphic, it is 28 degree. Your return air is 25. So kind of pre-cool, at least the 28 will cool to 27.5. Then the balance cooling requirement is addressed by the cooling coil. So it's kind of energy recovery. This is the type 1 where we can use this type of AHU. You can use the return air which cannot be mixed with the fresh air. The other type is energy recovery wheel. This kind of very old method. And so here there is a heat recovery wheel. This can be, so in this method you can mix return and supply. Again, you need to monitor carbon dioxide level of the return air uh, based on the carbon dioxide, and again the temperature of return air. Either you can stop the heat recovery wheel or you can run it. So once the heat recovery is running, the cool of the fresh air which is coming from the external can be cooled one step down using the return air. This is the VAV arrangement. So again, based on the occupant's requirement, the air quantity required for the conditioned space can be controlled. So in the VAV, variable air volume box, we call it VAV, that will operate based on the particular occupant requirement. If the occupant need more cool, VAV is kind of, basically we can say it's kind of damper. It will open and provide more airflow and cool the space. And other way, if the occupant is feeling too hot, he will play with the thermostat, then the damper will close. So based on that, the air handling unit fan or the motor will control the flow rate. Okay, then what can be the effective method can be used in the chill water treatment? Because water treatment is part of the HVAC, because you need to treat the water in chill water system and condenser water system. Chill water system is a closed system, but condenser water is an open system or open loop, which is going through the cooling towers. So this is a general graph which will show you how much energy can be lost if there is scale formation inside the pipe. Can be corrosion or can be due to the total dissolved solid in the water, solid particles in the water. It form a scale on the internal space of the pipe. So that will reduce the that will create resistance on the water flow, or that will create your heat transfer characteristics. To prevent that one, so in order to prevent the scaling, corrosion, falling, and biological growth, example Legionella, so we should have the treatment, or we should treat the chill water and condenser water. So these are the parameters we are controlling. To control these parameters, we are using corrosion inhibitors, biocides, scale inhibitors, or closed loop nitrite. So by having a better water treatment system in HVAC for chill water and condenser water, You can maintain and ensure the system is maintained with correct heat transfer properties. You can save water because if you're cooling tower, let's say you found that Legionella is available. So here the region I'm working, if you find Legionella, you need to shut down your plant. Doesn't matter your building is mission critical or your building is belongs to the president. Doesn't matter. If you found Legionella, you need to shut down the plant and disinfect. So imagine what will be the business impact to the building. By maintaining these correct water treatment parameters within these systems, so you can uh, save water, maintain system efficiency, and avoid unwanted plant shutdown and disturbance to the building operation. Okay, then periodic recommissioning. This can be either air system, air distribution system, or chill water system. Why periodic recommission is important? Okay, so in this graph, you have in one side, you have HVAC system performance. So let's imagine as a simple example, this is a air handling unit with a particular ductwork and cooling point. And other axis, you have time. So in this air handling unit or in your HVAC system, you are doing your maintenance in a perfect way. You are checking each and everything as per the particular board or manufacturer recommendation. You are doing a 100% well maintenance. But with the time, your system performance is reducing. That is nature, or that is the normal thing happening in any plant. Even though you maintain it correctly, your performance will be reducing. This will be this narrative only. So actual value almost same as this one. So you are doing you're operating the system maintenance plus periodic recommissioning. This period may be every 3 years or every 5 years. So every 5 years, you are checking your system. As example, as I said, is AHU. Is the cooling coil getting the design or required chill water flow? Is the fan performance are correct? Is the duct outlet or the terminal unit are balanced correctly? Because during the maintenance of various activities ongoing on a site, by mistakenly someone can change the damper position or someone can change the DRV position. So that will affect the system. So every 3 years, you are checking your commissioning value are correct. If not, you need to recommission. So then what will happen to your HVAC system performance? It's going down, then back to the baseline or the minimum requirement. Again, going down after 3-4 years, you will recheck everything and bringing back to the minimum requirement. This is the system operation, maintenance plus periodic recommissioning. Okay, the third one, you're operating the system, maintenance, recommissioning, plus you are doing continuous fine-tuning of sequence of operation. What I mean by that? That means you are operating the system as per the requirement. You are not running your air handling unit as per the design. You are changing or fine-tuning the sequence of operation as per your requirement. Let's say partial load. Let's say particular period of a year, you don't need to run the AHU in 100% speed based on the occupancy level or based on the outside air condition. You can manage the cooling load by running the air handling unit 50% or 60%. That is continuous sequence of operation fine-tuning. Plus, we are doing possible upgrades. Okay, in the market now available a better filter for the AHU, which has a lesser pressure drop. So you can review and analyze your filter requirement. You can review and analyze AHU ESP, filter pressure drop, and you can introduce this newest technology filter. One example. So with that, you can get the same performance from the AHU, same flow rate of the AHU with a less motor kilowatt. So if you are operating the system with maintenance, recommissioning, continuous SOP changes plus upgrades, you can maintain your performance above or same level of your baseline or the minimum requirement. Then the metering, monitoring, managing and benchmarking of utility consumption. This is traditional reporting of utilities. You have your energy supply management, capital planning and asset optimization team, and you have your facility management or operation and maintenance team. So these three stakeholders reporting particular utility requirement by referring energy meter values, market values, policies, various policies, and your FM team might be introducing best practice or equipment optimization, and the reporting will happen from these three different points. This is the traditional utility management. Let's say what will happen if you bring back your utility management to the BMS. So in the middle, you have the BMS, building management system. Now it is not one-way communication. As example, your FM team, facility management team, can feed the data to BMS, same time they can get the data from BMS. Same for energy supply management and assets optimization. How about the other utility energy metering? How it would look like? It is provided particular information only to the stakeholders? No. Now that also, if you are combining or if you are making a utility management using a BMS platform, everything is feeding to the BMS. So all the data are coming to one particular point. So in that point, you can do the analyzation, monitoring, and taking the decision at correct time. That will be how to manage the utility. Do we need to introduce a particular benchmark by referring to market or similar property energy consumption? So these decisions you can take easily rather than the traditional method. Okay, so this will be the HVAC system optimization module. So 4 factors we need to consider. So we discuss now chill water side, air distribution, water, plus BMS. So now when we are making the strategy model, weather, we need to consider the weather, outside condition, occupants comfort. Occupants comfort can be can be engaged to the model through a general satisfactory survey, or we can call it occupant happiness survey. Then operation and maintenance cost, again, your maintenance team, and the thermal model. Thermal model is the building HVAC model. So combination of all these 4 with BMS will give us, we can apply real-time weather forecast, utility consumption, indoor conditions, and demand response. That means we can combine all these values and let system to define what will be the requirement, or let system to have what will be the thermal requirement or thermal behavior or cooling load behavior within the building. Then with this model, we can control the occupant's comfort, utility consumption, set point adjustment, and if required, we can override or fine tune the equipment operation. So this is kind of, we call it intelligent BMS or advanced BMS platform compared with the traditional BMS. Okay, in traditional BMS, during the project commissioning or handing over, whatever the level or the parameters assigned, system will operate as per that. Then continual fine-tuning and update can be done. Main focus is on temperature and pressure because it has the basic control valves. And if any changes with the pre-assigned set point, it will create alarm and let you know, okay, there is a temperature is high in this location or particular pressure is not achieving in this location. This is the traditional BMS and how it will operate. System is optimized with traditional BMS, but that is fixed point and fixed in time. Advanced BMS or the intelligent BMS. This is BMS plus building optimization. So BMS itself, it will learn how to operate based on the various input, as you can see in the previous slide, based on the various input coming to the BMS, it will learn and operate. Means it analyze the data and operate. And it will adapt to the changes, continuous adaptation, and automatically it will adapt it. And it will operate not only the particular, let's say, not only during the commissioning period or 1 year after commissioning period, it will operate continuously around the clock, automatically. So this is predictive, continuous, and automatic. So that's the difference between the traditional BMS with kind of advanced BMS. Advanced BMS, yes, traditional BMS plus various building related inputs plus outside environment detail, might be the utility consumption values, everything input to the BMS, and it is a intelligent platform, and that will provide you better optimization output, optimized output. Okay, so we are at the end of the session now. So if any of you have questions, so I think Buddhika, you can let them speak if any of them have any questions or express your ideas or experience. Or else, I mean, if you have any questions related to the topic what we discussed today or what we present today, not discuss because I would like to have a kind of workshop, but as this is online webinar, we cannot proceed this as a discussion. So that's why I put the discussion part at the end of the presentation. So even though, so if you have any questions, you can send it to info@prolightinggroup.com. And you can go to my YouTube channel if you would like to see more about the various building engineering presentations. Or you can type your questions if you have any questions in the Q&A section, also in the chat. Buddhika, over to you now.
Okay, so seems like there are no any questions from the attendees. So yeah. All right. I'm speaking on behalf of ProLighting Group Private Limited. So first, We are thanking to Mr. Kalam Srivardhana, sir. Thank you very much for giving us your valuable time and sharing your knowledge and experience with us. And we are thanking to all the participants. Especially we noticed that there are Sri Lankan and foreign participants as well. Thank you all for the participation. We will meet again with another webinar session. Keep in touch with our official website, www.prolightingroup.com. We will upload the news on our website. So thank you very much again, Mr. Kalam Srivardhana, sir. Thank you very much.